Good evening, everyone. We'll be getting started in not too much longer, but I just wanted to make a quick announcement. If you are looking for the restrooms, our women's restroom is located here on your left, and men's over here on the right, and as well as some other exits that are on the side as well, and we have exits in the back. If you've never been here before, my name is Micah Eastridge. I'm the worship pastor. Thank you for being here, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you very much.
I don't know what I'm doing here. There we go. Hey, welcome everybody. So glad to have you here for what we're calling One Night. It's been kind of confusing for our staff because tonight's one night and this weekend we're having a church-wide retreat that we're calling One Weekend. But this is one night. We're not going to keep you all week. Let me just go ahead and say that. Thank you for coming tonight. I promise you, you're going to be challenged. You're going to be encouraged. And hopefully tonight you're going to be equipped. I've had the privilege to spend a little time this afternoon with Brian Montgomery, and just one of the things that hit me first of all was that he is very, very real and very genuine, and you're going to be really spoken to tonight. I believe that. And from a standpoint of a pastor, I want you to know He's a brother in Christ. He loves the Lord. And so for me, there was that immediate connection. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name's Tony Lambert. I have the privilege of being the pastor here at First Baptist Church. And a little over 4 years ago, when we came back to Picayune after a 30-year hiatus, God really put in my heart that we were to encourage influencers with the gospel. And I won't spend time to unpack that tonight. That's not why you came. But I will tell you this. At the heart of that vision statement would be families. And, of course, families would include children, but not necessarily having children, but just families in general. And so when I first heard about Walker's story, my heart was torn, as I'm sure most of you it was, and then as I began to hear more from his parents and how God was using them to speak and to literally open up minds and hearts about what's going on in our culture out there, I just knew we wanted to be a part of this. And then it was when the lovely Miss Joanna approached us and from Heritage and said, listen, we want to do this. Would you be willing to host it? And I said, absolutely. So we had, I think, one kind of quick meeting one afternoon with Mr. Brooks Wallace, and we kind of put this thing together, and or at least some details of this thing together. I was kind of the last one to the party, and we are just happy to be here tonight. So I want to introduce Joanna to you tonight. Joanna, if you'd come on up, won't you welcome her as she comes? Joanna will tell you a little bit about her heart and how this all came together, and then she's going to introduce Brian to us tonight. Ms. Joanna?
Thanks, Tony. Thank y'all so much for hosting the First Baptist family. Y'all have always been so good to us at Heritage, and so I thank you again for opening up your home to us so that we could share this, not just with the families of Heritage, but also the families of Pearl River County. And so this summer I had the privilege of hearing Brian at an administrative retreat in Gulf Shores, Alabama, as part of the MAIS Administrators Retreat. And he was the last speaker of the day, and I was familiar with the story. Susan Wallace was actually the one that had told me the story when it all happened. And having been in schools for a long time, this is my 30th year in education and my 22nd year in Christian education, I'm a bit jaded about things that can happen. And so I heard the story and moved on past the story. But hearing Brian's heart and seeing that he is just like us. He's a dad that's trying to make good choices for his family, that he thought he had done everything he could to keep them safe. He got them he's raising them in a Bible-believing home. He had them in church, had them in good schools, spent time with them, prioritized family time. And in one night, they found the loophole in his safety plan and came in and targeted his son. And in one night, it was all over. And so it was a burden after I heard him speak. And the verse that just kept rolling around in my heart was, we don't fight against flesh and blood. In Ephesians, it tells we're fighting against the evil principalities of darkness. And that's what I saw in this story. But I will tell you that a wonderful thing is that Brian's family is making beauty from ashes. They're giving it back to God and let him make something beautiful out of the ashes that were meant to hurt and harm. So Please help me feel welcome, Brian Montgomery.
What about now? Yeah, money. There we go. Now the back people can hear me now, so right. But we were just talking about what a small world it is, and Brooks, thank you and your family for coming and pick me up. I mean, just made it possible. God just knows how to put things in place. And what's interesting is the pilot flying us down here I went to high school with, grew up 2 miles from him. Michael Seal, great friend. Michael's great to see you. Great to see you. Buzz, good to see y'all. You interact with people all over the world, and you think that these little interactions you have, it just seems like it don't mean much. But then there's times where you realize it means everything. And so this is going to be a tough story. This is going to be a very serious conversation. It's going to be emotional for me. I'm not a professional speaker. I'm not a pastor. It's not what I do for a living. But I'm going to share with you our family. I'm going to share with you who we are. And so it's going to be a tough conversation. So I figured, these are some pictures of our family. To preempt what we're going to talk about, my son Walker, who you'll see in most of these pictures, that's our whole family you see right there. Walker died by suicide as a result of sextortion. And we're going to talk about what that is. The basic concept is they get nude videos or pictures of a young boy or girl or adult, and they leverage them, they extort them for money to keep from sending that out to people that they're worried about seeing it. And so I'm going to go into the details of how that happened and exactly what you need to know about that later on in the presentation. But, in anticipation of that, I thought I'd start us off on a little lighter note because this is going to get serious enough. So my younger son, Bennett, he's scared of his own shadow, just to be honest with you. But he thinks he wants to be an Army Ranger. So this summer, Walker died last December. And this summer, Bennett started talking about skydiving. And that's Bennett right there. You're looking at him, the one squatted down. So he started talking about skydiving. He's 13. So I said, okay, let's start calling. Let's see about that. Well, comes to find out, there's one place in the whole country that will let someone under 18 skydive. It's in Delta, Colorado. So we called and asked the guy, and just like you would expect, he was a kind of a hippie a little bit, Yeah, man, bring him out. I'll let him jump. So we went to Delta, Colorado. This is Bennett. Now, what I want you to pay attention to, his face. Jumped out of an airplane about 7,000 feet elevation. He realized his mouth was open about right there. And here comes the chute pool. All right, so now I want you to watch his daddy. That would be me. Now, what you're about to see is the major difference between a 13-year-old skin and a 47-year-old skin. I told you I could make you laugh. I told you. Yeah. I claim all that flab is because I lost about 20 pounds, right? Yeah. So what do you think the odds of dying in a skydiving accident are? It's about 1 in 167,000. That's the odds. So out of 167,000 jumps, something goes wrong. Parachute doesn't open, something tears up, and the results are catastrophic. So those are pretty good odds. You know, some people are scared of heights and it wouldn't matter. You know, they're not getting in the airplane. And most people say, I'm not jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. I didn't have the heart to ask for the parachute when I got on the plane today. So 1 in 167,000. To the best of our understanding, about 12 kids committed suicide in 2022 due to sextortion. 12. So we don't know how many kids were attacked. We don't know how many instances this scheme was carried out. But we do know there's more than we know. Out of the 12, those are confirmed. We know those kids responded to this scheme and they committed suicide. We know that. And Walker was one of the 12. So I don't know what the odds were of us being one of the 12. I don't know what the odds are of me being in front of you today. You know, I'm always tempted to say, I appreciate you having me here. And I do. But the reality is, I know what brought me here. I know why I'm here. And that's tough. That's hard. And so our pain, our cost, the price that our family has paid, the price that we're going to pay from now until we see Walker again in heaven, that price you can have the benefit of. The things I'm going to say are not perfect. The things I'm going to say are not always going to be absolutely accurate. What I will tell you is that I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to tell you the best of my ability the right answer. I'm not going to hide from things. We're going to have some Q&A after I talk, and there's nothing off the table. You ask what you want to ask. So, our story, what happened? I'm just going to kind of, as we go, I'm just going to kind of put pictures up there so you can see who we were. Our family is just a very normal family. I mean, you'll see a bunch of pictures. You saw some flipping before I started, but you see me and Walker here with a couple of turkeys. Walker killed a turkey with a bow. He killed an antelope with a bow. We deer hunted together, bow hunted together, went all over the country together, went to Kansas, New Mexico, all around the state. I mean, it's just what we love to do. He loved football. We were at a Kansas City Chiefs game. Got to go see that on our deer hunt the Thanksgiving before last. Our family was really, I mean, my wife and I really tried to make an effort to have a very normal family where we spent time together. We didn't overemphasize our work effort. I mean, I didn't work 80 hours a week. I didn't spend that effort doing those things. I mean, we worked a normal schedule and really committed our time to our family. On the weekends, we were together, either on the farm or working somewhere, playing somewhere. We were together as a family. We didn't disperse. You know, who was Walker? Walker loved football. Walker had an incredible work ethic. Anybody that knew Walker knew that was his calling card. Walker loved to be respected by adults. I mean, if he approached you in this church, he would look you in the eyes, tell you his name, and shake your hand. And those were the things that we thought were important. And I still believe those things are important. Raising a family, there's no higher calling, parents, than the responsibility we have to raise good kids. No higher calling. There's no work calling. There's no, me being here tonight is not a higher calling than me spending time with my kids. And so I still believe that. So some things we know about Walker. We know Walker did not have a mental illness. We know Walker wasn't depressed. We know Walker wasn't bullied. We know he didn't have social struggles. Well, you say, well, Brian, how do you know that? Well, kids, something that we found out was that there's never anything that goes away on your cell phone. The FBI confiscated Walker's cell phone, and they went through it with a fine-tooth comb because we had no idea what happened to Walker. We had no idea. None of this made sense to us, and still doesn't in a lot of ways. But we know why he did it. It wasn't because he was struggling. It wasn't because he had friend problems. It wasn't because he had girlfriend problems. It wasn't any of that. It was one night. One single night. And we know that because of the forensics off his cell phone. And I'll talk about some other things that we did find on his cell phone that could be considered concerning, but it's not why he did what he did. So, what happened to Walker? On the night of November the 30th, Walker went to bed living his best life. Happy. We ate supper together. Bennett, his younger brother, and I went deer hunting that afternoon. Walker came home from school. He had just gotten his driver's license. He had just turned 16 November the 1st. He came home after school, worked out. We've got a pole barn. He had some workout equipment over there on the pole barn. He goes over there and works out. Me and Bennett get in from hunting. We have supper together as a family, eat, hang out, talk. I was picking at him. He just got in a truck, and he got him an F-150 four-wheel drive, and he wanted to put 35s on it and cut the mufflers off. Who can relate to that? You know, and nice truck. I was like, boy, we're not doing that. He said, come on, Daddy, I said, look, we'll talk about it, you know, just picking at him. Had big plans. He goes to bed, Bennett goes to bed, my wife prays with him, closes her doors. We're all off to bed. About midnight, Walker receives a message on Instagram. Hey, what's up? Looked like an attractive teenage girl. Walker responded, not much, just hanging out. This becomes just a casual conversation, just like any teenager would have. Where do you go to school? Well, I go here. What about your friends? Like, you play football. How's football season? Just normal conversation. That turns into this person convincing Walker to have a sexual encounter with them in the messaging portal, the video portal of Instagram. So imagine a FaceTime call where Walker's viewing this girl is viewing Walker. I'll let you fill in the blanks. It was a sexual encounter over the internet. Walker didn't know it, but he was being recorded by a secondary device. So what we later learn is that if you screen record, it tells you. Somebody on the other end of a FaceTime call or an Instagram call, it tells you if you're being recorded by the phone. But it don't tell you about that camera that's set up in the background videoing him. And he didn't know that. So as soon as this was over, they come straight back to Walker and said, hey, we want $1,000, or we're going to send this video to everybody that you know. Now, I want you guys to, we talked about this a little bit on the way up here, but I want you guys to just try to comprehend that moment. You know what you just got through doing. You can imagine you thought that was private, and now this person immediately sends this video right back to you of yourself and says, we're fixing to send this video to everybody. Now, I don't know about you, but I can relate to that. I can look back at my life. I can look back at the things I've done, the places I've been that I thought were private. If you're an adult, I can tell you, you can relate to that. And all of a sudden, that thing that you thought was private is not private anymore. And don't think about the person that you don't mind seeing it. Think about the person that you can't imagine seeing it. That's where Walker's mind went. All of a sudden, his life flashed before his eyes. And it was bad enough. I'm sure Walker's imagination could get him to that desperate state, but it wasn't good enough just for his imagination, because this person now is saying, hey, give me the money, I'm going to ruin your life. Everybody that knows you is going to see this video. I'm going to ruin your sports career. I'm going to ruin everybody that could see this video. The whole world's going to see this video of you, Walker, if you don't get me paid. And Walker is desperate. He is panicking. He can't imagine. It's a trap. Walker did not just put a pinky toe in the trap. He stepped right in the middle of the trap. And so that trap, all of a sudden, he's panicked. He's in this trap. And we're going to talk about a trap here in a minute. I'm going to show you guys. We're going to relate this to a hog trap is what we're going to relate it to, something we did quite a bit of. That's going to be pretty raw. But I want you to get the feeling of where Walker was in this moment. So he don't know what to do. So they're telling him, your life is over. Everything you love is gone. Give us the money. Give us the money. Walker says, I don't have the money. Steal it from your mom and daddy. I can't do that. I'm talking about just own him. Finally, they send him screenshots from Instagram and the messaging portal that shows on their side where they're sending the videos out to people in his friend list. He thinks they're sending the videos. He didn't know it, but they weren't. They weren't sending the videos at all. But he didn't know that. They just wanted to make him panic even more because they wanted the money. So he sees these videos, these screenshots of their messages going to people that he knows. that he loves, that he cares about, to my daughter, to my wife. Finally, it gets to my wife, to Courtney. And Walker responds, I'm going to kill myself. And I want you to think about the reality of, from just a practical point of view, if they just wanted the money, they would have said, no, don't do that, because just wait till tomorrow. We actually, because they hadn't seen any of those videos. They didn't send any of them to our knowledge. We haven't found any of those videos that were sent. So they could have easily just said, hey, we didn't send the videos. We were just trying to scare you, but if you don't get them tomorrow, we will. It's not what they did. Send us money. We're sending the videos out. Walker says, I'm going to kill myself. They said, go ahead, because you're already dead anyway. It's evil. It's pure evil. That somebody can't find a compassionate place for a 16-year-old boy that's that desperate. Don't forget, went to bed healthy, living his best life, and now he's ready to kill himself. That pressure, that reaction, on one hand, I can't imagine, but when I think of myself in that scenario, all of a sudden, I see the trap. I see how trapped he was, and he couldn't see past the trap. So Walker went into my office, went into my safe, got a handgun, and went back up to his room and took his own life. We found him on the morning of December the 1st, 6:23 in the morning. So that's what happened. What I want to do tonight is to talk about some aspects of this trap. From a youth perspective, I want you paying attention, because these are some things that I think are hard to talk about with your parents, maybe hard to hear from a coach, maybe hard to hear from a teacher, but these are realities. These are realities for adults, and they're even more reality for you as kids, because you haven't figured out how to deal with some of these realities. So I'm going to show you a video of a hog trap, and when you watch it, I just want you thinking in the context of what we just described Walker went through. And I'm going to go through it. I'm going to talk about the realities of that hog trap. I'm going to talk about what are the aspects of it that make it vulnerable for the hogs, but more so those attributes of how this particular scheme and society within technology have built weaknesses in there for you that they're trying to trap you with. So the trap is being ran. I'm watching that trap. This is our trap. The trap is being ran by a cell phone. So I'm watching that video. You wait till all those hogs are right in the middle before you drop the trap. So, what makes the trap effective? What makes the trap so effective for the hogs, and what made this trap so effective for Walker? So, number one, the trap is elevated. Did you notice that? Did you notice where the trap was? So, why is it elevated? So, what we're trying to do is we're trying to exploit the hog's blind spot. So the hogs have a blind spot. So generally speaking, hogs walk around looking straight ahead or at the ground. Well, why is that? Because there's no danger or food above them. All their food is on the ground, and any danger they should be able to see. There's no birds of prey that can get to them. They pretty much have no predators, no natural predators. Hogs are very invasive. They reproduce 3 times a year, and by the time the first litter is at the end of the first year, they're reproducing again. 8 to 12 pigs per litter. So when you think about it, and they're not a native species, so they damage the habitat, so we have to trap them if you own land and want to manage that land. So they have a blind spot. Why is that important? Because when that hog comes up to a traditional trap, they see it's a trap. They can see the cage. They can see that they've got to go through a small hole that creates vulnerabilities. They're apprehensive about going into that because they can see it's a trap. It's in their line of vision. So we elevate that to exploit their blind spots so they don't feel like they're walking into a trap at all. They feel like they're just getting a free meal. Why is it important? How does it relate to Walker, and how does it relate to you as a teen and us as adults? What are our blind spots? Individually, they're different for men and they're different for women. Men, our blind spot is we have a true physical need and desire for sex. That's how God made us. That's how God designed us. Designed us to be competitive. Designed us to defend our homes, to defend our wives, to defend our families, to defend our homes. That all kind of centers around our desire to seek out a mate. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's how God made us. Until that desire and that physical need leads us places we shouldn't go. And we should be able to all relate to that as men especially. Now, these statements are generalized. So there's a spectrum. Some men are more so, some men are less. Some women are more so, some women are less. It's all different. But what I want you to hear me say is that as a general statement, men, we have that as a weakness. Boys, you have that as a weakness. And Walker had that as a weakness, which is what led him to say, yes, I'll participate in this with you. And that's real. It's not evil that we have that desire. It can be exploited for evil, which is what specifically happened to Walker. What about the girls? As a general statement, girls have a desire for attractiveness, for attention, for beauty. Y'all are pretty. That's how God made you. It's good that a boy wants to look at you. That's what makes this thing work. God made you that way until all of a sudden that need for attention, that need to be looked at, that need to be admired leads you to a place, leads you to do things, leads you to say things you shouldn't do. That's a reality. I've got 2 girls, so I know. I see them taking selfies all the time. That's what y'all do. Why? Because you want somebody to come right back behind that text and say, oh, you're so pretty. Awesome. I like your makeup. I like your hair. We see that, right? We see that in our culture. We see that in our relationships. But you know what we don't do? We don't talk about it. Why not? It's kind of weird. It's kind of embarrassing. I'm making some of you uncomfortable here right now. I told you this is going to be a hard conversation. And I can make light of a few things. But the reality is that these weaknesses lead you places you shouldn't go, cause you to do things you shouldn't do, cause those hogs to go in that trap because they did not recognize it was a trap, cause Walker to say yes when he was getting coached into the trap. The next thing that makes the trap effective is it's baited. So we put corn right in the middle of that trap. And you would think that the hogs would just smell the corn, run right in, I dropped the trap, game over. That's not how it works. So you saw that group of hogs. There were some older ones and some little ones, big ones and small ones. So what normally happens is the first night we bake the trap, some of the small ones will come right in. The little ones, and you'll see the bigger ones in the background. Next night, a couple of the big ones will come in, but they'll run right back out. They know something's not right. They just don't know what. Give them about a week, and all of a sudden, we've conditioned them to believe it's safe. We've conditioned them to believe that the bait we put in the middle of that trap, that free meal, is safe. It's not safe. None of those hogs went home that night. It's not safe. And so this conditioning that we go through, this conditioning that Walker went through, of thinking things are safe, we walk around with this in our hand, in our pocket, in the bathroom, in our bedroom, in you name the place, and we think it's safe. And 99.9999% of the time it is safe. What about that little minute part of that decimal place when it's not? It can be catastrophic. The third aspect of the trap is that it's being monitored. So that trap, I can pull up, the battery's dead in it right this second, but I can pull up that trap, open up the app, and look and see at any moment what's in the trap. It'll send me a notification. If a deer walks in there, a coon walks in there, it sends me a notification. Pops right up, something's in your trap. Open it up, look at the video, look at the same video you just saw. Yep, they're right in the middle of it. Hit the drop button, curtains. That's it. What's that got to do with you? You're being monitored through social media. Walker was being monitored. These people didn't just show up out of the blue. They knew his friends. They pretended to know his friends. Pretended to be in relationships with his friends. Said, I know such and such. This guy right here I'm friends with. They were not any of those things. But they knew enough about Walker to be able to pretend. They were monitoring what he was doing. They knew he played football. It was all over his page. That's pretty easy. It's not hard to identify. They were being monitored. You were being monitored. So, that's the aspect of the trap. So from all this being talked about, the trap, what Walker did, it has to bring me to a place. It has to bring me to a place where I have to ask the question, why? Why did any of this happen? Why are we here? Why did Walker choose to do what he did? Well, to begin with, Walker had to make a decision based on what he thought other people would say, what he thought other people would do. Part of that is a responsibility on us as a society and a culture, particularly our Christian society, our Christian culture. We starch our shirts, get them nice and ironed, and I look all put together up here, right? I'm telling you, I'm no more put together than you are. And our kids start to see us in a place. Our kids start to see one another in a place that's not real. We all have the same struggles. There's nothing new under the sun. Girls, what you struggle with, your mama struggled with. Boys, what you struggle with, your daddy struggled with. No different. Different context, different place, different time, but it's all the same. How does that have anything to do with Walker? Walker, in his mind, thought he was the only person on the planet with this problem. This specific problem at the time, maybe. But the context of his overall problem, he wasn't by himself. He just didn't know. But he thought these people, he believed the lie. He believed the lie. That song, Fear is a Liar, started to ask you guys to play it. It's a true statement. My wife hates that song. Because she sees the lie that Walker believed. It was a lie. Kids, it's a lie. There's nothing you can't do. Nothing you will do in your life your parents will not love you through. Nothing. The second why with Walker is he had access to harmful content. So what does that mean? What is harmful content? What are we talking about? Number one, I told you there was something on his phone that was concerning. Pornography. Something we don't talk about hardly ever anymore. We've just come to accept it as a part of culture. It's the victimless crime, I think, is how they position it. Walker wasn't a porn addict. It's not what he did every day. But it was on his phone. He was a 16-year-old boy with all of those realities I've already talked about, trying to figure his way through life as a young man. If you're a grown man in here, you can remember those days. I know I can. I cannot imagine having access to this. Unlimited. Anything you want to see, anytime you want to see it at 16 years old. Can't imagine. But the reality of it is, especially, this is speaking to the young men here in this room, The reality is you are not alone in that. You are not alone in your ideas about pornography. And I'm going to give you some statistics. 35% of all internet downloads are pornography. Think about how big the internet is. 64% of Christian men and 15% of Christian women say they watch porn at least once a month. You know what that means? I'm talking to a bunch of people that are in that boat right here in this room. Should we run them out of that door right back there? Absolutely not. We're all in the same boat, folks. 50% of pastors view porn on a regular basis. Victimless crime. I could tell you that the generation I grew up in, it felt like a victimless crime. It was a magazine or a VHS tape. Had to know somebody, had to sneak around. It wasn't on demand. It's not what it was. And it also didn't lead a 16-year-old to a place where he felt like he had to take his own life. Times have changed, men. It is not a victimless crime. And if we as a culture don't start to realize that, this is going to continue to degrade our reality of human relationships to a point we cannot return. And we've got to start talking about it. Those statistics are not wrong. You may be sitting there saying, there's no way that's right. The math doesn't lie. So, Walker had access to harmful content. I'm his daddy. I should have known better. I didn't. He also had Instagram. Bunch of 15, 16, 14, 13-year-olds in here have Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I can probably go on down the list. I don't know any of the other ones, but I can act like I do. I can act young. Walker had, and look, we're in a world where this is a way of communication. I get that. We're not putting this horse back in the stable. It's not going back. I want you to understand what these social media platforms are doing. Their job, their business model is engagement. What is engagement? The more time I spend doing this right here, this is engagement. Why is that important? They've unlocked the code to advertising. They get paid by advertisements. People pay for space. Their space on their feed is paid by the amount of time somebody sees that feed. Okay, so you hear talk about the algorithm. What does that mean? Well, the algorithm identifies what you like and feeds you what it thinks you like. Sometimes you may not even like that, but it identifies your demographic and feeds you what your demographic likes. What's a demographic? 15-year-old boy, 17-year-old girl, 47-year-old man. So it engages you more and more and more and more. It feeds inappropriate content if that's what it takes. Criminal content if that's what it takes. Whatever it takes, because right now it's like the Wild West. There are no restrictions, no legal constraints for tech companies. We plan to change that. And a third major practical why this happened is that Walker had minimal oversight from me, his dad. Well, why is that? You can look at me and say, well, Brian, you should have done more. Brian, you should have had his phone. You should have done this. You should have done that. And I don't disagree with that a bit. What I'll tell you, I told a parent not long ago, I said, you know what? He said, I trust my daughter. He had listened to a conversation like we're having right now. He said, you know what, I'm learning, I do trust my daughter, but I'm learning that I may not should. I said, no, you're wrong. I still trust Walker. I trusted Walker then, and I trust Walker now. What you better not trust is the people this gives him access to. It's what you better not trust, because they are not trustworthy. My wife and I were talking this afternoon, and she reminded me of something that I said. I want you to think of this, and I think of it as Walker. I said this in a meeting a few months ago, that it's like, I think about this phone in Walker's room that night. It's almost like a door right outside his room that opened to the worst this world has to offer. I didn't lock it. I didn't barricade it. I didn't even put a soft entrance into it. I said, there you go. Just open it and go do what you want to do. That's what this phone gives our kids access to. I didn't know. I got an excuse I didn't know. If you're in this crowd, you don't have that excuse anymore. You know. Now, is it always going to lead to what happened to Walker? No, it's not. There's a lot of problems associated with what we're talking about that does not lead to suicide. And I hope and pray you never experience that. So, how should we respond? What should we do? Number one, today, the only thing that we can do is spread awareness, educate. Schools, churches, teachers, coaches, parents, wherever anybody will listen, I want them to hear our story. Because I know if I'd have been sitting where you are and Walker would have been sitting beside me and somebody else was up on this stage, I have no doubt, I am 1,000% confident Walker would still be here today. And that's hard. That's difficult. Because then I got to go back and ask the question, why us? Why are we the ones on this stage? We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. The second way we should respond is through legislation. We've come to a place in society where we've let this industry is the biggest industry on the planet. Bigger than oil and gas, bigger than all of those put together. It's huge. They've got influence everywhere. Not just influence in legislative angles, but influence through the information that they can propagate. They can change hearts and minds through what they allow to filter through this system. They have no oversight whatsoever. So we're promoting a bill called the Kids Online Safety Act to at least put parents in the middle of the conversation, give you some tools to be able to monitor and pay attention to what's happening on your kids' devices. Require them a duty of care to kids. We're not asking for adults. We're not saying, hey, if you're a 30-year-old man, 20-year-old man, 18-year-old man, and you want to do whatever you want to do on that phone, that's your business. But if you're a minor, we expect you to treat them different. So, that's kind of in a nutshell the practicality. No, when I say practical, what I'm saying is, what are we doing in life? You know, what are the things we can touch? What are the things we can feel? What are the things we can affect? You know, providing some oversight with our kids' phones. Kids, let your mom and daddy take your phone at night. Let them have it. There's nothing you're going to do on it between 10 and 6 in the morning that's profitable. Nothing. But there's a lot bad that can happen. A lot. Parents, be courageous. This job that we have takes courage. It takes people that are willing to say, I am committed. I'm not going to let this win. And it's going to be a struggle. I know, can you imagine if you're here and you were 16 years old, if you can remember that, you remember it's an automatic condition to resist mom and daddy. This is a tough job. That's the practical side. The spiritual side. Well, what are you talking about, Brian? What's God trying to do? What's God trying to affect? I can tell you this, none of this is a surprise to God. This society we live in, the culture we're embedded in, the technology, the internet, God didn't wake up one day and say, oh my goodness, Satan got the internet. I'm in trouble. That's not what he did. It's not what it is. We're living in a place in human history that's very important to what God's trying to do. So I'm going to get to Job in a minute. 1 Peter 5:8, it's not on the slide. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. So think about that. I stuck that in there today. That's why it's not in my presentation, because I wanted to kind of reiterate. I usually use that Bible verse in my presentation, and I'd removed it. But in preface to this Job reference, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. So we think about, okay, we feel like sometimes that there's not a devil. We believe in God, but we don't believe in the devil spiritually. We say, I'm not really worried about that. You're missing a big part of it. The devil is not inactive. He's not asleep. He's doing just what this Bible verse says. I use the comparison a bunch where you ever watch the Discovery Channel, you watch the lions, and you watch the herd of gazelle running by, and that lion's just sitting there like he ain't even paying attention. He's just hanging out. What you don't understand is he is paying attention. He's looking for something very specific. He's looking for a weakness. And when he sees the weakness, all of a sudden he ain't sleeping anymore. That's what we're talking about here. So this verse in Job, so obviously this is a place that a lot of people in human history have gone to in tragedy. And we read this book of Job. I know I did. After this happened, I just embedded myself in Job because I want to understand how, God, did you let this happen? God, how did this come to be? And as a Christian community, most of us want to say, God didn't do that. God didn't have any part in that. It's really not what this Bible verse says. And if my God is sovereign, if He's in control, if He is in control of my salvation and my eternity, either He's in control of everything or He is not. There's no middle ground there. This verse says on Job 1, 6 through 8, says, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on all the earth, and from walking up and down on it. Does that sound familiar? And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless, upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? Why is that important? Number one, you see Satan's activities. What's his activities? He comes to God, but he's been out there looking for somebody. He's not been searching around for food. It's really clear where he's been. He's been looking for somebody. And he comes back to God wanting recommendations. God gives him one. And this doesn't appear to what we normally think about God and Satan as this good guy, bad guy relationship. It's not a good guy, bad guy relationship. God knows right where to find Satan anytime He wants to. He's not hiding. He's not hiding from God, the creator of everything. So how should we process this, and how can we make sense out of this? How can I make sense out of this? Because then I see God say, what about Job? And as clear as I see you here in this building tonight, I see God, what about Brian? What about Walker? I see it. Am I a righteous man like Job was? Absolutely not. Job was a good man. God wants something to come out of this besides death and destruction. And God wants me to realize, Brian, you can count on my love no matter what. Wanted Job to realize that. Wanted Job to realize that, Job, you're not in control. You don't pull the strings. I do. I've got a purpose. I've got a plan that's an eternal plan. It's not short term. It's long term. It's a big plan. And my plan involves the creation that you couldn't create. And we all think about what God created. We see the story of creation. And we know that God created the earth. He created the heavens. He created people. He created animals. Created the oceans. He created all that. And we love that. We love talking about that, how awesome that creation is. But let me tell you, that is not His greatest creation. And we as Christians need to be able to convey this clearly. God's greatest creation is love. And the only way love exists is through free will. That's the only way love exists. I can't force Michael Seal to love me. Can't do it. Because then it's not love. So if God would have created us as robots, He couldn't count on our love, and we couldn't count on His love. His greatest purpose He wants to achieve in our lives is the demonstration of His love in relationship with Him and one another. That's what this is about. That's what this story is about. It served all kinds of purposes in human history. But Job had to realize that after taking everything from him, God took everything from Job except for a nagging wife and 3 sorry friends. Took it all. He wanted Job to see, Job, it's not about you. I love you in spite, through this tragedy. I love you. And I believe that's why. I believe that's why I'm here today. I believe that's why God is using Walker's life. He's using my family's life. These are some verses that just bring us comfort, and I'm going to talk about those. You know, Walker and Bennett. You see Bennett here in both these pictures. The next morning after we found Walker, we were all just shattered. Couldn't figure out how to even move, really. Just can't describe that. Can't describe it. You don't want to hear it. But Bennett and I were sitting on the couch, 10 o'clock in the morning or so, still trying to just in a fog. But Bennett's 13 years old. And he said something that I'll never forget. Because it's Thursday morning. I mean, we were supposed to be at school. I mean, he's going through his mind. If it's 10 o'clock in the morning, I would be changing classes, or I'd be doing this, or I'd be doing that. And he says, this was just supposed to be another normal day. Think about that. Tomorrow, we may wake up to what is not at all a normal day. December the 1st, 2022, turned into the furthest thing from a normal day for me, for Bennett, for everybody in our family, everybody that knew our family. So that reality, you've got to somehow contend with that. You've got to understand that this is short term. So these are a few verses that I think help us. 1 Peter 1, 6-7 says, in this you rejoice, though now for a little while, I think I've got it in here. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold, that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So we think about that, our faith being tested, and that purification of gold, that going through the fire to create something better than was before. That process is hard. That process most of us avoid in our lives. We create lives that make us avoid those situations. We try to make enough money, we don't have to worry about being hungry. We try to be good friends with everybody so we don't have to worry about rejection. We go out of our way to please people, go out of our way for our jobs. We create a bubble of comfort in our lives. I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. But I do know that in service to a cause, there will be difficulty. And this says, pretty plainly, that's part of the process. And they're hard. So that invokes fear. It invokes emotions and all the things that go along with that. Isaiah 41:10 says, fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. That should be comforting. That should be strengthening. It does for me. When I get down, I've got to remember that my God is capable. If He's capable of dealing with my salvation, if I say I believe in Him to handle my eternity, this ought to be a breeze. He's got it. Don't mean it's not going to be hard. Doesn't mean that fire doesn't get hot. People ask me all the time, why do we do this? There's all kinds of answers. There's all kinds of reasons I could say. But I do see this as a spiritual fight. I see it as a battle. We're all in this fight, not just me. You're in a fight for your kids. You're in a fight for your family, for your wife, for your husband, for your mama and daddy. Kids, you're in a fight for the future of your life. There's going to be a lot of things asked of you in the course of your life. Lots of things that are hard. And it's a question, I have to ask myself this question. What am I going to do? Am I going to be inactive, or am I going to be in the fight? And then, I wonder, think about this story of Job. You wonder, did Satan ever look in the mirror and say, you know what, I wish I hadn't picked on Job. I wish I'd have left him alone. There's no reference to that in biblical scripture that I can find where you see Satan having a response that says he has a regret about something he did. Yet, he will, but yet I don't see that anywhere. But I want to be on his list. One day I want him to say, I want Walker back more than Brian does. Because of the impact that Walker's life could have on people just like you. So I can tell you, you can't navigate these problems without a relationship with Christ. Can't do it. I can't do it. So I'm telling you tonight, if you don't know Jesus, tonight is the night. Because tomorrow may not be a normal day. Tomorrow may be absolutely abnormal. And it may be a day that you can't back up from. So if that's what you need, I suggest tonight would be the night you would do that. So I appreciate you coming out tonight. I appreciate y'all having me. Appreciate y'all organizing this. This is a couple of numbers. I would suggest you guys send it out on an email. The top one is a hotline. I know several kids that have found themselves in a bad spot have called this number. The bottom one is if you have any compromising photos or videos on the internet, they'll help you get those taken down. Find somebody, kids. If you find yourself in this situation, I had a conversation just last night. Family happened to know my family. Called. It was a young man. And the reality is this young man hadn't done anything wrong. He had accepted a friend request over Snapchat and sent a picture of just his face. He was hysterical under the thought that they could send something and tell other people that it was him and that other people might see that. This is real. This is happening right now. I tell you that about last night because this is not something that was happening back in December. It's not happening now. It's happening today, tonight, right now. So please, if you find yourself in this situation, find somebody that can help you. And we can do questions, however you want to transition from this point.
Thank you, Brian. We do want to just give you a minute maybe to ask some questions. I know there's got to be a lot of specific things that you're asking, and just to give you just a second to process, one of the things that struck me was, again, I'll go back to what I started out with tonight, that this happened in one night. And there was really very little that you could have found as evidence in Walker's life that would be a trail that would lead to this. And I think the fact that at midnight, as Brian shared with us, that this all began, and really in the matter of 3 hours?
4 hours, yeah.
About 3 or 4 hours. Then Walker finds himself in such a predicament, at least in his mind, that he takes his life. For me, listen, my kids are grown. They make their own choices, but I've got grandkids that, like all you grandparents in here, I'd die for them. And to think that they could find themselves in this situation, my thing is I want to know what to do. I want to know how to communicate with them. And so anyway, I want to give you opportunities just to ask. And if you'll just do this, if you have a question you want to ask Brian, I don't think we'll need a microphone. I think if you'll just stand and just project a little bit, I think we'll be able to hear you tonight. So I know there's got to be several, so who wants to maybe do that tonight?
Yes, so you can go to my Facebook page. I try to post everything that we do that becomes digital on Facebook. So I'm assuming this is being recorded. You guys will post it. When you post it, I'll share it, and then it'll be. So you can go to my Facebook page, just Brian Montgomery, and everything that I'm doing, I'm putting there. Yep, you're welcome. Are there questions? So usually people will ask, what about the criminal aspect of this? So these people originated out of Nigeria. We're confident. The FBI has been very good, I think, despite what you hear in the news, despite all the political rigmarole. We were very lucky to get a great FBI agent out of the Jackson office. She has been phenomenal. She's been like a guardian angel. I mean, it's hard to believe. I never would have believed that, and we have not arrested, there's not been anybody arrested yet, but we're confident somebody will be arrested. And those come with really harsh penalties, minimum of 30 years in prison, federal prison. We're very optimistic. Continue to pray for that, continue to pray for that process. They found out pretty quickly that it originated from Nigeria, and that's when that investigation started. And they've been really good about running that trail. Usually get questions about filters, phone filters. The two things that I would say as a parent from an oversight perspective, I already said one. I firmly believe that if Walker's phone would have been kept by us at night, just something pretty simple. I know it doesn't sound simple, but it is simple. It's the fact that, my son shouldn't have been on the phone at midnight. If you're a young person, you need your rest. You need your sleep. And it's going to be very hard for you to be a functioning person staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning on a cell phone, and then you can't go to sleep, and then you got school tomorrow, then you have athletics, and then you have all the other things that you're involved in. That one thing, and I know Walker would still be here, but the filter side of it, what can we put on our phones, kids' phones, to help intercept these kinds of problems? There's not anything great right now. Covenant Eyes, we think it's what I use personally for the rest of my family now. Bark is one that I've heard pretty good things about. I really don't know much about it, but what I want you to hear, if nothing else, is engage that process. Engage that process. Yes, ma'am. Great question. How can you help with the legislation? So, Kids Online Safety Act is a bipartisan bill that is supported by, I think we're up to 45 co-sponsors in the Senate. Both Mississippi senators, we've gotten on board with it. So in Mississippi, our senators are supportive. We expect a vote, we hope for a vote on that this fall in the Senate. If it'll pass out of Senate, which we think it will, it'll have to go to the House. So what we're seeing today is the more liberal states are, I shouldn't say it's just more liberal, because Senator Blumenthal is an author of the bill, and he's from New York, right? So my point is that there are a lot of legislators that are not in support of this, and we don't know exactly why. It seems pretty straightforward. We want to protect kids. And typically the conversation leads to a transgender message of, if a kid's transgender, they won't have the ability to find communities, and they don't need their parents knowing about it, and I reject that wholly. We're not going to sacrifice 99.5% of our kids for 0.5%. That's stupid. That's bad policy. Even if you believe the 0.5% is truly transgender and not following a trend, which I don't. What can you do? Continue to follow this legislation, and we're going to be asking for help. We're going to be asking for phone calls, because when it goes into the House, we expect it's going to be a more difficult fight. In Mississippi, particularly, we're starting to work on a statewide bill that will protect our kids in the state. So our local senator, Bart Williams, passed the porn bill in Mississippi. It passed in Louisiana last year, which means that to go on a porn site, you have to show ID. You have to prove that you're an adult. Sounds normal, right? Because if you're under 18, you're not supposed to be looking at it anyway. Of course, they don't want that. But we passed that in Mississippi. So I think it starts this fall sometime forward. You'll have to show ID, some form of photo ID, to get into those sites.
Have you considered making a CD? I know you can't be all over the world at one time, but making a CD that churches and schools can use?
Yes.
Educate?
So we have made a video. I put the notification out on my Facebook page and actually that's what we talked about doing here. So our initial, it's kind of awesome how God just worked this out, but I'm trying to figure out how to be at home and take care of, we're 9 months after losing Walker, so Courtney, my wife, is running softball and all kinds of stuff. This afternoon is a good example. And so I initially said, look, I've got this video that the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation funded that's there's a faith-based version, there's a version that is just the story that if a public school system wants to play it, and we're offering to introduce that and answer questions on the backside virtually, just because of just what you said. So if somebody wants that video, message me on Facebook, and I will be glad to send you that link so you can download it. We want that to go as far and wide as we possibly can, because every time that thing plays, I don't have to be there. Thanks for that question. That's tougher when you get down 11, 12, 5th, 6th grade. It's a tougher conversation. Personally, I believe, I don't have the answers, number one, but personally, I believe at that age, it is still an effort of restriction. Hey, if you're going to be on technology, mom and dad are going to see what you're seeing. And I think that's a great age to start, because it's one thing to tell a 10, 11, 12-year-old person that this is the way it is or not, versus you've had a 16-year-old that's been experiencing unfettered access to this technology, and all of a sudden now you're going to take it back. So if you start in the right spot, it's a lot easier to end up in the right spot. So for me, at that age, I've got a 12-year-old, just turned 12, and she don't have access to any tech, social media-wise. She has an iPad, and we pay attention to what's on it. She's only very limited access, no private access. So I think that age, and not to say that the communication can't happen, because they're seeing things at that age that you wouldn't think they're seeing. They're hearing things that you wouldn't think they're hearing. They know a lot more than you think they know. So I think partially is feeling that conversation out and trying to understand kind of where the particular kid is, and then move forward for that conversation. But in general, from a parental perspective, I believe that some of these things we talked about tonight are very sensitive. They're hard to talk about, and most of us don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. But starting to be vulnerable with our kids. Understand that I'm not perfect. Understand that I've got a lot of problems. Understand that I've got a lot of temptations. And it's not easy for me to say no to that. It's not easy for me to, let that go, whatever that thing is, because we're all different. But having that vulnerability with our kids and let them know that I'm not perfect. I don't expect you to be perfect, but this is a safe place. I'm going to hold you to a high standard. That don't mean when you don't meet that standard that it's over. So I'd say that would be the guidance how I would have that conversation.
I'm being asked if we recorded it. I believe we did. I know we were going to stream it over for overflow if we needed it, so I think we have it.
There's a question right here. Yeah. Yes, thank you for asking that. So I'm in several work groups with other parents that have lost kids, and social media is not the only place this happens. Gaming is absolutely a place that happens a lot. And it's even harder to police the gaming side of it, because there are these game groups, from what I understand, and those can be just outside participants. So there are some security settings. I don't know them. But here's the best way to think about it. Any technology platform that will give your kids access to strangers is a threat, and we need to be paying attention to it. I got a question. I got a question last week in a church, and it kind of set me back just a little bit. And I think it's in a church setting. This guy. I think he had well intentions when he asked the question, but his question was, "Tell me how you were discipling Walker, and what was your process in a Christian home? What were you doing with Walker?" And so the question was kind of positioned a little bit of, if you would have been doing these things, this wouldn't have happened, okay? And I'll be honest, I responded to it, but it kind of set me back a little bit. So I had to really give that some thought. Did I drop the ball on discipling Walker? If I'd have prayed with him more, because he said, reading Scripture and learning Scripture and all those things absolutely are defenses against a world that's against us. I'm not debating that. But I see plenty of examples biblically where I would say David was probably one of the most well-discipled. He said he's a man after God's own heart. David and God had a special relationship. And I see where David commits adultery and murder in a period of his life. Why is that important? Why is that a point I wanted to make? That's a question some of you guys were asking in your mind. If he asked that guy last week, somebody here had that question tonight. Said, well, Brian, if you'd have been a little bit more aggressive in your discipleship process with your son, this probably wouldn't happen. That may be true. I don't know. But I do know this. I know that we've got to commingle this aspect of life that says I've got a spiritual life I'm trying to cultivate and I'm trying to develop. At the same time, I've got physical temptations that I'm battling. And we've got to bring those two things together. It's not a simple process. And there's not a simple answer to any of this. So I don't have all the answers. But I can tell you the more we engage, the more we commit, the more we work, the more we pay attention, the more we engage Christ in our life, the better that walk's going to be. So, other questions? I can't tell you how much I do appreciate you having me here tonight. In spite of what led us here, I hope that if there's anything that I can ever do, I get messages all the time from kids having problems. And if we can save just one, the enemy loses. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Brian. What we're about to do is going to be really important. Forgive us just a minute longer. Brian, first of all, let me say, I know this is a horrible spot for you to be in, but we're glad that you're faithful. We so appreciate you and Courtney, your wife, and your kids. I promise you, those of us that didn't know you have been praying for you, some of us, but now we will do that more, brother. And stand strong because we need your voice. And thank you for that tonight. I had talked with Brian about this, and actually Joanna as well. And just really quickly, I would encourage you. Joanna and I had a discussion, interestingly enough, today about one of the things he touched on. And I would say this: it's not too early to start having these conversations with your kids. I don't care how young they are. And I would say, in the cradle, we need to be real. That was a word that Brian and I used several times today. We need to be real. The day of you being awkward and shy and not wanting to talk to your kids about sexuality and those things, you're just throwing them to the wolves if you don't. And so those days that's gone. You've got to explain to them why their bodies are like they are. Explain to them as small children. Use age-appropriate language, absolutely. But tell them why God made them the way that they are. And tell them what God's ultimate plan is for their lives. And you cannot start that too early. I'm just telling you. You can't give them the whole message necessarily, but start teaching them to celebrate how and why God made them and help them to understand the healthy context of His greater plan and purpose for their lives. Let me encourage you. Did I do okay on that, Joanna? Would you agree with that? And so please do that. And I just really felt burdened today to do this. Parents and grandparents, please hear me. We love you. You are at the center of our demographic of encouraging influencers of the gospel. But so is educators. And parents, the truth is, our educators may have more access to our children than we do. And so they are incredibly critical in this fight that we're in this battle that we're in, as they influence them hours every day, especially during the school year. And so just as we begin to close tonight, I know there are several here from the different school systems. I want to ask you tonight, if you're an educator, again, just strongly felt led to do this. If you're an educator tonight in any form in the school systems, all right, would you just stand for a minute? This is not to applaud you. I want to pray over you tonight before we dismiss. So if you're an educator, would you just stand? In any form you work in the school systems, in any form whatsoever, would you just do that? Thank you for your willingness to do that. First of all, we want to say to you, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you so much for investing your life. Both of my daughters are teachers, and I say, you took a vow of poverty, okay? That's just the reality, right? But I'm just telling you, we understand the pressures that you're under, and we are thankful for you. And so we're asking tonight, we're asking for you to continue to help us, continue to be those advocates, and know that we care about you, and we care obviously about our children, and we're so grateful for all that you do. But I want to just pray over you that are standing specifically, maybe watching in some other format, or will watch later. If you'd allow me just to do that, would you all just bow with me? And we'll actually use this as our closing prayer tonight. Father, we just come to you tonight. And God, thank you for the voice that you've given Brian. God, there are questions that, Lord, we can't answer. God, I know there are things that Brian and his wonderful wife, Courtney, even now struggle with daily. And Father, it's easy for me to say to them, hey, one day in eternity, we'll have these answers, and God, we may not. It may not matter then. But God, it matters now. Boys and girls, men and women, Lord, they're in a fight for their souls. They're in a fight for the life that you've given them and created them to live. And so, Father, I pray for incredible wisdom. Lord, I pray for courage. Father, your word is clear that Satan is roaming, and he does have authority, and he does have power. God, your word says that if we'll submit to you and we'll resist him, he'll flee from us. But God, we've got to begin at where you begin and submit to you. If we don't do that, God, as Brian shared so clearly tonight, without Christ, we don't have any authority over what we're facing. And so, Lord, I pray first of all for that. And then, Father, these educators in the room, God, who are such incredible partners with us as parents and grandparents and guardians. God, we're so thankful for them tonight. And Lord, many of them are in secular organizations, God. That, Lord, it's not necessarily in favor of anything spiritual being talked about, and certainly not talking about you. And so, God, I pray you'll continue to give them courage and strength and grace. God, I pray that they would simply look for every door that you open up to speak life and truth into our children. God, I pray tonight they would be encouraged. God, I pray tonight they would be motivated and inspired. And God, that they would know that what they do does matter. So God, strengthen them tonight. Bless them tonight. And Lord, thank you so much that they came. God, just bless them just because of their attendance tonight. God, for all of us, we are in a war. And so we pray, Father, that your Spirit would provide for us all that we need. God, that we would turn to you, depend upon you, submit to you. And God, that you would give us victory in our families, in our homes, in our lives. We thank you for the Montgomery family. We pray blessings over them tonight. Peace over shattered hearts tonight. And we pray it in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And stay in touch. I know that Brian would love to hear from you, and just let him know how this has spoken to you tonight. Have a good evening.